Would you consider, if you win and he's convicted, a pardon for former President Trump?
I'm not going to get into those hypotheticals. I'm focused on the next 14 days.
But do you believe, is there any part of you that subscribes to the argument that has been made in the past that a pardon could help bring America together, could help unify the country and move on?
Let me tell you what's going to help us move on. I get elected president of the United States.
With just 2 weeks to go before Election Day, Vice President Kamala Harris sits down with NBC News, and we're going to show you the entire thing coming right up. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. It is 14 days until Election Day, and there is no time to waste, both for candidates and voters. More than 17 million Americans have already cast their ballots, and a number of states have set records for first days of early voting. But those waiting for November 5th, well, both candidates are making last-ditch efforts to secure their votes. Donald Trump rallying in North Carolina tonight, where he encouraged the early voting in a state reeling from Hurricane Helene.
Our hearts are with you, and we are praying for you. The polls are open for early voting in North Carolina and every day from now till November 2nd. But if you're displaced due to the storm, you do not have to return to your home county to vote. You can request a ballot to your temporary housing location.
And on Friday, Trump is scheduled to be on the Joe Rogan podcast, consistently ranked the most popular podcast in the world. Meanwhile, the vice president just sat down with our very own Hallie Jackson to talk economy, abortion, and the trust of the American people. Take a look.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for your time today.
I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
We were just talking about the campaign trail yesterday.
Yes.
And these key Rust Belt battlegrounds, as they call them, talking with undecided voters.
Yes.
You are reaching out that olive branch to these voters. You want to bring them on board. For them, for so many voters, we know that a huge issue for them is the economy.
Right.
It's the cost of living. I've been on the campaign trail. I hear that in the field again and again. You look at some of the numbers on this, and our new NBC News poll shows that more voters think that the Biden administration policies have hurt them rather than helped them. And I wonder, are the last 4 years an obstacle to you in this race?
Here's how I look at it. First of all, let me be very clear. Mine will not be a continuation of the Biden administration. I bring my own experiences, my own ideas to it, and it has informed a number of my areas of focus, most of which are, on, to your point, lowering costs. I am traveling the country. I am very clear. Cost of groceries still too high. The voters know it. I know it. So part of my plan includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries, including the work I will do dealing with price gouging, something I dealt with when I was Attorney General, something I will deal with going forward. Cost of housing. You know, I'm speaking with people of every background in every area of the country, of every age. And, you know, the idea of the American dream was something that previous generations could count on, not as much anymore. Bringing down the cost of housing by doing what I have done in my career that perhaps is a different approach, which is really actively working with the private sector, for example, home builders, to create incentives for them to build millions of new homes in housing units so we can bring down the cost, including what I will do to give people a $25,000 down payment assistance if they are a first-time home buyer. So these are examples. The example is what I'm going to do to expand the child tax credit because, listen, young parents in particular, they need help. They have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources. $6,000 extra during the first year of their child's life can help them buy a crib or a car seat or clothes, the things that are so crucial to that phase of their child's development. So my plans and my policies are really directed at exactly your point, doing what we must do to bring down the cost of living, but also to help people not just get by, but get ahead. And I'm proud to report to you that economists from Nobel laureates to Goldman Sachs have reviewed my economic plan versus Donald Trump's, and in comparison have found that my plans will strengthen America's economy. His plans will weaken America's economy.
Then why do you think that's not landing with voters? Because in the numbers,
it's
the opposite. Former President Trump leads you on this issue.
Well, when I'm out, this is why I'm going out to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, excuse me. Just got in late this morning, actually. But going to 3 states yesterday, and I'm going to continue being on the road. I have to earn the vote. And it means sharing with folks my plan, but also offering them what objective analysts have shown to be the contrast between me and Donald Trump. My plans are focused on working people, the middle class, and what we must do to strengthen hardworking people to be able to do what they dream and aspire to be able to do. His plans are about giving tax cuts, massive tax cuts, to billionaires and big corporations. His so-called plan for the economy, economists have estimated, will exacerbate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. So there's a huge difference between he and I.
Let me ask you about something that you said when you were running for president the last time around, back in 2019. At the time, you said that the elephant in the room was whether the country was ready for a woman and a woman of color to be president. So let me ask you, as you sit here today, do you think the country is ready now for a woman and a woman of color to be president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I am saying that in terms of every walk of life of our country. You know, I think part of what is important in this election is really not only turning the page, but closing the page and the chapter on an era that suggests that Americans are divided. What I know from personal experience, from lived experience, and from my travels even most recently, the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And what the American people want in their president is a president for all Americans, which is the type and kind of president I pledge to be. This is my life's work. As you know, I started as a prosecutor. I never asked a victim of crime, a witness to crime, are you a Republican or Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them is, are you okay? And that's what the American people want to know, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender or their age. They want to know that they have a president who sees them and understands their needs and focuses on their needs, understanding we all deserve to have a president who is focused on solutions and not just fanning the flames of division and hate.
You've been reluctant to lean into, to talk about the historic nature of your candidacy on the campaign trail. Why is that?
Well, I'm clearly a woman. I don't need to point that out to anyone. The point that most people really care about is, can you do the job? And do you have a plan to actually focus on them?
But I hear you on that.
That is why I spend the majority of my time listening and then addressing the concerns, the challenges, the dreams, the ambitions, and the aspirations of the American people. They deserve to have a president who's focused on them, as opposed to a Donald Trump who's constantly focused on himself. I think that's part of why people are exhausted with Donald Trump and his approach, because it's all about himself and his personal grievances, and not about the American people, not about how are you going to help families, how are you going to help small businesses, how are you going to strengthen our economy. These are the things I'm focused on. I'm focused on investing in the new industries on which America should lead and be a global leader.
I ask because to implement the agenda that you want to implement, you have to win first. You have to win the White House. And right now there is a big gender gap in this race. Fewer men support you right now than they did President Biden. Some of your allies have suggested there's sexism at play. I wonder, do you think there is sexism at play here?
Let me just tell you something. You've come to my events, and you will see there are men and women at those events, whether it be small events or events with 10,000 people. So the experience that I am having is one in which it is clear that regardless of someone's gender, they want to know that their president has a plan to lower cost, that their president has a plan to secure America in the context of our position around the world. They want a president of the United States who honors our military, who understands the importance of America's leadership around international rules and norms. And that is regardless of gender.
So
and that is how I will lead.
Do you not see sexism as a factor in this race at all?
I don't think of it that way. My challenge is the challenge of making sure I can talk with and listen to as many voters as possible and earn their vote. And I will never assume that anyone in our country should elect a leader based on their gender or their race. Instead, that leader needs to earn the vote based on substance and what they will do to address challenges and to inspire people to know that their aspirations and their ambitions can and will be achieved through the opportunity to do that.
Some of those voters that I spoke with at some of the events yesterday, for example, talked about they were there to support you, but also your agenda when it comes to reproductive rights and abortion access. And you have cast this as a matter of literal life and death as an urgent priority here. If you win, it is entirely possible that Congress will be controlled by Republicans. So what specific concessions would you be willing to make in order to get something done on abortion access as soon as possible?
Well, first of all, look at what has happened since the Dobbs decision came down, a decision that is a direct result of the fact that Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe. They did as he intended, and now in 20 states we have Trump abortion bans, which some make no exception for rape or incest, which criminalize health care providers in a state like Texas, prison for life for doctors and nurses if they provide reproductive care. And where we have seen this issue on the ballot, to your point about elections, from red states to blue states, when freedom is on the ballot, the American people vote for freedom, regardless of the party they are registered to vote with. We have seen that. And I know that there are members of the United States Congress who are well aware that their constituents are in favor of the very fundamental principle that a woman should be able to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do.
So is a question of pragmatism then, what concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example, is that something that you would consider?
I don't think we should be making concessions when we're talking about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body.
To Republicans like, for example, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, who would back something like this on a Democratic agenda if, in fact, Republicans control Congress, would you offer them an olive branch, or is that off the table? Is that not an option for you?
I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals because we can go on with a variety of scenarios. Let's start with a fundamental fact. A basic freedom has been taken from the women of America, the freedom to make decisions about their own body. And that cannot be negotiable, which is that we need to put back in the protections of Roe v. Wade. And that is it.
But what if you can't do that? What if you can't get that passed and you want to save lives in Florida and in Texas and in Georgia? What do you do at that point?
I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you right now. Because right now,
it's a question that's out there because it's not a guarantee that Democrats will win control of Congress.
Well, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we do. On this issue, I think that what is clear to me is whether someone is. I was just with one of the leaders, and I think opinion leaders in the Republican Party, Liz Cheney, who has as she has stated publicly and has expressed her.
She said it on stage yesterday.
She is pro-life. But she also understands the pain and the tragedy that has happened since Donald Trump allowed Roe v. Wade to be overturned. So that's my point about what is non-negotiable. It has to be that we agree that it is so fundamental that we allow women the ability with their doctor, if they choose, talking with their faith leader, to be able to make these decisions and not have the government tell her what to do.
On the question of your beliefs, what you believe in, let me ask you this question very broadly speaking here.
Sure.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is a decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary. I'm not going to put myself in the position of a doctor, but let's also understand that Donald Trump is running tens of millions of dollars in ads to talk about 2 cases, to distract from the fact that his policy and plan is also to take away the Affordable Care Act, which provides health care for tens of millions of people in our country. That his plan is to undo the $35 a month cap on insulin that impacts millions of seniors in our country. That his plan is to do away with the $2,000 cap on prescription medication, the annual cap. That his plan is to get rid of the Department of Education, which would mean getting rid of Head Start. That his plan is to give tax cuts to billionaires and big corporations and on the backs of middle-class working people. So let's not get distracted by the issues that, to your point from the introductory point you raised, people want to know that their president has a plan to make their life better. And that includes bringing down the cost of living. It includes dealing with prescription medication costs. It includes addressing the housing crisis and affordable housing crisis in our country. It includes supporting our small businesses, investing in American industries, and strengthening our economy.
I will move on, but I don't know that I heard a clear answer from you on the issue of gender-affirming care. It sounds like what you're saying is there should be something between trans Americans and their doctors. It feels like that's a long way from "we see you and we love you," which was your message to trans Americans in May. What do you want the LGBTQ+ community to know as they're looking for a full-throated backing from you for trans Americans?
I believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect, period, and should not be vilified for who they are, and should not be bullied for who they are. And that is a true statement for me my entire career, and that has not changed.
Part of the case that you're making to undecided voters and to these late deciding voters is not just the case for you, for what you would do. It's the case against former President Trump. And on that, we are sitting here 2 weeks away from election night. Last election, the former president came out on election night and declared victory before all the votes were counted. What is your plan if he does that again in 2 weeks?
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go. And I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand, and we will deal with election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a serious matter. The American people are, at this point, 2 weeks out, being presented with a very, very serious decision about what will be the future of our country. And it includes whether we are a country that values a president who respects their duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Donald Trump had said he would terminate the Constitution of the United States. The American people are being presented with a choice here about whether we want a president who understands that America must stand strong as a leader around the globe, or an individual in Donald Trump who openly admires dictators. My goodness, recent reports that he gave COVID tests to the president of Russia during the height of the pandemic here, when Americans couldn't get their hands on COVID tests. These are the choices before the American people right now. The choice before the American people is the choice to choose to turn the page on the division and the hate, and to bring our country together, knowing the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us, and that we can be optimistic about a new generation of leadership that is focused on what we have yet to achieve, to uplifting the American people.
If you win, it is entirely possible that the federal court cases against the former president will continue on. He is, of course, facing those felony charges. Would you consider, if you win and he's convicted, a pardon for former President Trump?
I'm not going to get into those hypotheticals. I'm focused on the next 14 days.
But do you believe, is there any part of you that subscribes to the argument that has been made in the past that a pardon could help bring America together, could help unify the country and move on?
Let me tell you what's going to help us move on. I get elected president of the United States.
One of the things you've talked about is having a Republican in your cabinet, potentially.
Yes.
You've spent a lot of time on the campaign trail with former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, as you referenced. Is she somebody who you would consider putting in the cabinet? Have you talked with her about this topic?
I'll keep you posted.
Okay. On immigration, because this is another issue that's really important to Americans here.
Sure.
Immigrations and customs enforcement, of course. Back in 2019, you stopped short of calling to abolish ICE, as some Democrats were doing at the time, but you also said...
I'd never called for
correct,
abolishing
you stopped short of that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You said we should critically re-examine it, and you considered starting from scratch. Would you consider, if you're president, starting from scratch with ICE?
Let me tell you what the Customs and Border Patrol agents need, what the immigration system needs. It needs to be fixed. And it needs to be fixed in a number of ways that include bringing forth a bill that conservative members of Congress, along with others, pull together, that we supported actively, that would put 1,500 more border agents at the border to give those folks who are working around the clock and need support the assistance they need to get their job done. What we would do with that bill, if it were brought forward, is be able to continue to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is ravaging communities around our country. It would give us the more resources to do what we need to do to prosecute transnational criminal organizations, something I have done. But what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got word of it and told his friends in Congress, kill the bill, don't bring it forward, because Donald Trump would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And again, in this election, there are two very different choices. One that is focused on solutions, and the other that is focused on constant grievance and running on problems with no agenda for fixing them. And in fact, on this issue of immigration, he has been an obstacle to fixing this problem. My proposal includes strengthening what we must do to ensure that we have an orderly and humane immigration system and that we fix what has been broken for a long time. It has transcended administrations, and it needs to be fixed.
You have made it clear that you believe this is a binary choice between you and Donald Trump. Those are the candidates on the ballot.
There's only two choices.
Yes, yes. And I know that Joe Biden is not on the ballot. I understand that. But the reason that you are at the top of the ticket is because he dropped out of this race. And so I want to ask you, and it was largely because of that debate performance back in June. You defended him in the days before and in the days after as you were campaigning for another 4 years for President Biden. Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
And you never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. And my presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people.
It's a judgment question. That's why I ask. Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way? So that's why I ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you never saw anything like that from President Biden.
I have worked with Joe Biden, hours and hours and hours over these 4 years, whether it be in the Situation Room or the Oval Office. Joe Biden is the one who was able to bring NATO together during a crisis where, for the first time in 70 years, Europe saw and has seen war. Joe Biden has done the work that has been about being a leader on what we have done to fix so much of what has been broken in terms of the economy because of Donald Trump's mismanagement. I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work. I have no reluctance in saying that. No, of course I don't.
Madam Vice President, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
NBC News Now senior Washington correspondent, News Now anchor, weekend nightly news anchor Hallie Jackson joins us. Hallie, so good to see you. Incredible interview. You spent a lot of time with her, not just in that interview, but kind of shadowing her on the trail as well. Out of all of this, what stood out to you the most?
Well, a couple of things, right? I think being on the campaign trail, which, you know, is a thing that many reporters do, but watching the push for undecided voters. She's really looking to appeal to these, you know, moderate Republicans, to so-called late deciders, if you will, to get them to come across and turn out for her. This is a very small slice of the electorate, Gadi. We're not talking about a lot of people, but they could be crucial in these key battlegrounds because of what we're seeing in polling. The numbers are just so close, right? This is a very hot scoop. This is a very competitive race, as I'm sure you and our viewers are aware. I would say a couple of things from the interview, too. You know, I think the question on abortion access and what she would do across the aisle with Republicans is an interesting one, right? Because when you look at the battle for control of the Senate, control of Congress, it is not a given that Democrats will end up sort of on the side that they would prefer, right? The side that is in power. It is possible that Republicans could control Congress. And in that instance, there will have to be some discussion around what concessions you would have to make when you do, end up in that position. She clearly feels like she doesn't need to or want to engage on that, at least right at this moment. I would say the gender discussion and the gender gap discussion also stood out to me, but just because she doesn't talk about it a lot. She doesn't bring it up on her own often out on the campaign trail. And so to me, that was illuminating. I think, of course, we'll talk about this, I know, but the context around the question regarding gender-affirming care for transgender Americans. And then, I think some of the discussion around some of these other policy issues that are going to be important to voters as well.
Yeah, when you were pressing her, I mean, the question about trans health care, for example, did it surprise you that there was so much? Look, I know you can't say there was tap dancing going on, but did it surprise you that there was maybe not as many straightforward answers as someone might expect?
Well, I'll give you the context around this, and we referred to it in that interview. I didn't want to sort of get into that with her because she knows the context, of course, which is that Donald Trump and his campaign are spending tens of millions of dollars on ads focusing specifically on this issue all across the country. I bet our viewers have seen them, right? They're on a lot of local stations in a lot of these battlegrounds. There's a really sort of heavy rotation of this. And so the question was really about what does she believe in, right? I mean, that's something else that some voters say. About a third of voters in some recent polling suggest that they want to know more about who she is and what she stands for. And so that was what that sort of line of questioning was intended to elicit, Gadi, just to kind of give you some of the background on that.
And Hallie, lastly, the pardon question to me was absolutely fascinating. Again, no clear answer, but it left me with the impression that she kind of like wants to project this high road, kind of cerebral, rising above the fray air about her, while her opponent, every single day, we see him throwing basically haymakers. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think that tone is going to change in the home stretch here?
What I can tell you about her home stretch is that she is really going to hammer one of the issues where she does have an advantage in polling over former President Trump, and that is on the issue of reproductive rights and the issue of abortion access, because she is heading to Texas later on this week. That is not a traditional battleground state. We don't talk about Texas the way we talk about Pennsylvania or Arizona or Georgia, but that is a state that has a restrictive abortion law in place. And so she and her campaign want to spotlight that in a way they hope to help mobilize some of these voters in battlegrounds around the country, right? Like that's kind of the goal and the key thing for her there, while obviously continuing to hammer that message that she did in that interview, Gadi.
Hallie Jackson, so many important questions asked there for posterity. Incredible interview. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
And Donald Trump is back in North Carolina tonight, his fourth event in the state in 2 days. But earlier today, he was in Miami, where he held roundtable talks with Latino voters, where he once again took a shot at Vice President Kamala Harris. Take a listen.
Who the hell takes off? We have 14 days left, and she'll take a couple of more days off, too. You know why? She's lazy as hell, and she's got that reputation.
His coming as the latest NBC News Telemundo CNBC poll that surveyed thousands of Latino voters found that the VP has a 14-point lead over Trump among Latinos, which is the lowest for a Democrat in the 4 most recent presidential elections. For more, let's bring in senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haig. Garrett, while Harris is speaking with Telemundo tonight, how is Trump targeting his message to Latino voters?
Well, Gabe, he's not really. Trump has Spanish language ads. He tries to reach out to the Latino community, but his policies are pretty much the same across the board. It's just a little bit of tweaking on the edge. He just did this just now behind me in Greensboro, talking about the idea that he believes undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants, as he says, are taking the jobs that should go to legal immigrants in this country. That is a message that his campaign thinks will help him with Latino voters as well as African-American voters. Also, you may have seen some of these ads they've been running about transgender rights, suggesting in the tagline that Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. That's another attack line that the Trump campaign believes will work with Latino voters who tend to skew a little bit more socially conservative than the electorate at large.
Trump is in North Carolina for the 4th time in 2 days, with his campaign urging supporters to take full advantage of early voting there. What do you make of that?
Yeah, look, we're at a huge Coliseum room right now next door to an early voting site. I watched people all day long come from the Trump event line over to cast their ballots early. The Trump campaign has done better than any other Republican campaign in recent memory of getting their folks to vote early in this state after basically getting blown out in early vote in 2020 because of all the times that Donald Trump attacked sort of non-election day voting. They're trying to reverse that trend now, and I was told by one campaign advisor today, they're trying to push North Carolina kind of out of the swing state column. They think they might be able to do that with this sort of mini push we've seen here over the last 2 days. Gadi, I will believe that when I see it. I think this is still going to be a dogfight in the Tar Heel state.
A dogfight that is now wading into the podcast world. What do we know about Trump's scheduled appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast? And what about him joining Tucker Carlson on Halloween?
Yeah, look, the Joe Rogan thing was a long time coming. It had been rumored for quite some time. Trump has made these kind of bro podcast appearances really core part of his media strategy this time around. He's trying to reach young men. He's trying to reach folks who don't pay a lot of attention to politics. The Joe Rogan Experience is a perfect place for that. It's also the most downloaded podcast in the country most weeks. So finally appearing on that show less than 2 weeks till Election Day makes a lot of sense. The Tucker Carlson piece of this, Tucker Carlson, as a media figure on Fox, and even afterwards, has been a Trump supporter at times, a Trump critic. Remember, he spoke at the RNC. Here you have him acting as sort of a event host and surrogate, a way to kind of piggyback on Carson's popularity. Although I think there's not a lot of gap between Tucker Carlson fans and Donald Trump voters in most places you would look in this country.
Darren Hake, thank you. Now, don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, the former head of Abercrombie Fitch charged with disturbing crimes, how he's being tied to an international prostitution ring, and why it's taken so long for the allegations to come to light. Plus, on the ground of the scene of Israel's most deadly strike in Lebanon during this new conflict, our Matt Bradley is going to take us inside the destruction. And later this hour, a whale of a tale in tonight's Future of Everything, how AI and algorithms are being used to keep an eye on the movements of humpback whales, the puzzle pieces being put together in lightning speed. And Thompson takes us on this adventure.
Is it true that no two whale tails are alike?
Absolutely.
Really?
You know, like a fingerprint or a face. Every humpback whale's tail is distinct.
Hey, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Rudy Giuliani is being ordered to give his apartment and valuables to the former Georgia election workers he defamed. The two poll workers filed action to seize his assets. He owes them over $140 million in damages. Last year, a judge found Giuliani liable after he accused them of election fraud in 2020. And Harvey Weinstein now has a form of bone marrow cancer. Two sources telling NBC News the disgraced movie mogul was diagnosed with chronic amyloid leukemia. He is going through treatment while behind bars at New York's Riker Island. Weinstein was recently indicted on new charges after being convicted of rape in 2022 in Los Angeles. A separate conviction in New York was recently overturned, and Weinstein's legal team did not comment on his health. Federal investigators were back at the scene of that Houston helicopter crash. They are investigating how an Air Tour helicopter crashed into a radio tower. You see it happening right there in that video. And if there were any issues with the lights on the tower it crashed into, all 4 people on board were killed Sunday night. The crash ignited a fire below spanning some 4 acres. And there is a deadly E. coli outbreak linked to the McDonald's Quarter Pounders. 49 people across 10 states have gotten sick. The CDC is saying an older person in Colorado has died. That's where most of the cases have been, and infections were reported over the last few weeks. McDonald's has removed Quarter Pounders from the menu in affected areas as officials investigate. And a woman was extremely lucky when crews in Australia rescued her after she got stuck there in a crevice. She was trapped for 7 hours while trying to reach her phone. She was upside down between the 2 boulders. Her friends originally tried getting her out, but the pros had to take over. In the end, she just had some minor scratches and bruises, but she still wasn't able to get that phone. And tonight, the former Abercrombie Fitch CEO has been released on a $10 million bond after being arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking and interstate prostitution. Mike Jeffries left court just hours ago in Florida, accused of operating an international sex trafficking and prostitution business. Prosecutors say he allegedly lured dozens of young men into sex parties around the world, promising modeling jobs in return. And here's how the prosecutor explained part of the alleged scheme.
The staff ensured that the men signed non-disclosure agreements. The defendants caused the men to believe that not complying with requests for certain acts, sex acts during the events could harm their careers, and ensured that the men did not leave the sex events until Jeffries and Smith decided that the sessions were over.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra. Marissa, break down these specific charges and allegations for us here.
Hey, Gadi. Well, I'll clarify. The reason that Smith and Jeffries had their federal hearing today in West Palm Beach is simply because this is where they were at the time of their arrest. Jacobson was in the Midwest. But of course, all of this stems from that case in New York, the Eastern District of New York specifically. And if you look on your screen, you'll see the 16 charges that each of them face. And it is related to sex trafficking and interstate prostitution tied to 15 alleged victims. Now, today, the New York prosecution described the trio as men who preyed on the vulnerable who had dreams of successful careers, outlining from 2008 to 2015 in these allegations that the trio hosted or arranged sex events around the world and lured in men who had dreams of becoming models for Abercrombie Fitch, and instead, against their knowledge, had them come to these sex events. They would sign non-disclosure agreements. They would hand over their phones, and they felt pressured and coerced to drink alcohol, to consume Viagra and poppers. And Gadi, the prosecution says the victims were led to believe that not complying in these explicitly sexual acts would harm their careers. Now, there are 15 alleged John Doe victims, but the prosecution also said today they believe there are many others, asking them to come forward. And as you just explained, as we just heard, Jeffries was released on $10 million bond with GPS monitoring. Jacobson was released on $500,000 bond, but Smith, who is a UK citizen and therefore prosecution was afraid of flight risk, he will be held in detention until that next hearing, Gadi.
And Marissa, how is Jeffries responding? And what do we know about the alleged victims? Have we heard from any of them?
So I'll kind of outline what we've heard from everyone so far. Abercrombie Fitch has declined to comment. And as Jeffries was leaving on bond, I did actually, along with my producer, ask questions. As he was getting into the car, we asked, do you have anything to say about this case? Do you have anything to say to these alleged victims? He declined to comment or respond to us. And we also asked the same of his lawyer outside of this courthouse. Here's what he said to us.
We'll be dealing with these matters in court, not out here.
Now, the law firm representing the victims did say in part, as you're about to see on your screen, quote, this arrest is a huge step on the path to justice for many young men who were exploited and abused by Jeffries and Smith, who used Abercrombie to pull off one of the most organized sex trafficking operations in United States history. And we mentioned past accusers, Gadi. I want to point out that one of the past accusers, Brett Powell, has previously said that he had felt pressured into attending these events, and said today in a social media post that he is, quote, overwhelmed and processing, calling today, quote, another step in healing. And Gadi, this does seem to be moving very quickly. We do know that there is another step in this happening on Friday, that hearing on Friday. We know that if they are convicted, they could face minimum 15 years in prison. Gadi?
Marissa Parra in West Palm Beach, thank you so much. Now let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Angela Sinandela for more. Angela, the timeline here, the NDAs, are these going to complicate the case?
No, not at all. So look, the deal with NDAs is that they cannot prevent you from reporting a crime, from speaking with prosecutors. The idea is that an NDA is a contract between private parties, so you and an employer, for example. But that doesn't at all affect the government's right to enforce its own laws or to go after who they believe is a criminal, to obtain the information and the evidence necessary. So NDAs, when you sign them, they always have limits, and a very hard limit is when there's a crime involved. NDAs are meant to do things like protect trade secrets, not cover up illegal activity, Gadi.
And yet we've heard of them over and over again. I mean, one case in particular, there's been a lot of comparisons here to the allegations against Sean Diddy Combs. How are these cases alike, or are they totally different?
Yeah, there are so many similarities between these cases. First of all, two of the charges of sex trafficking and also of interstate prostitution are almost identical if you look at how they were using force and fraud and coercion by luring these individuals with glamorous modeling or lifetime career opportunities and almost dangling that in a way to compel them into commercial sex acts. The big difference, though, I would say, is with the RICO charge. So only Diddy is facing a RICO charge, and that is much easier for federal federal prosecutors. It's almost like a catch-all. It's one of the few ways that you can hold someone responsible for other people's actions, not even your own. I almost think, though, given the allegations against Mike Jeffries, that had he owned Abercrombie & Fitch and not just been the CEO, that a RICO charge could have been possible there, too. But in this case, federal prosecutors only bring charges they really believe they can win. And I believe in both cases, the evidence is just compelling, Gadi.
Angela Sanandela, thank you so much. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. An Italian surfer has died off the coast of Indonesia after a swordfish jumped out of the water and stabbed her right in the chest. That's according to local reports, and it happened this week. It was 36-year-old Giulia Manfrini, and she was a popular surfer and influencer. Marine experts are calling her death a rare and freak accident. And in Argentina, investigators are looking into the death of singer Liam Payne. Yesterday, prosecutors met with Payne's father, saying they can't release his body yet because toxicology reports are still pending. They're also piecing together his final hours to try to understand what led to his death. Over the past few days, Payne's former bandmates, other celebrities, and family members have shared heartfelt tributes in his honor. And over in Cuba, most of Havana is back online tonight, but the rest of the country is still struggling to restore power. The island is continuing to recover from a nationwide blackout and a tropical storm that killed at least 6 people. Cuba's national grid has failed 3 more times since initially crashing last Friday, and experts say the aging grid is at a breaking point, with blackouts making it harder to get fuel and water. And a major international summit, excluding the United States, is underway in Russia. This is the first meeting of a group of leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa and China, as well as a half a dozen others, hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin. The summit aims to bring together developing countries to counter Western influence. Meanwhile, over in the Middle East, Israel is looking into a proposal from Egypt that could lead to a 2-week ceasefire with Hamas. That's what an Israeli tells NBC News. And it comes as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region for another round of talks. He met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, once again pushing to de-escalate the ongoing war in Gaza. Meanwhile, it's been a violent couple of days in Lebanon, where the Israeli military is expanding their attacks targeting Hezbollah. That was the moment an Israeli airstrike hit a residential building in Beirut, causing it to come crashing down in seconds there. Just in the past 24 hours, Israeli airstrikes have caused major damage across Beirut and killed at least 63 people, according to the Lebanese government. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley was on the ground in the aftermath of one of those airstrikes.
For the past several days, the Israelis have been warning people in this area to leave their homes before airstrikes that were targeting what they said were Hezbollah positions and Hezbollah financial institutions. But this place was struck without any warning at all. And we're only steps away from one of the largest, most important hospitals in Lebanon's capital, which was already struggling under an influx of injured people from all over the country. Now, it's been hours since this airstrike, where about 13 people were killed. That number is going to be increasing, we think, because there are still family members here who have taken it upon themselves to try to sift through the wreckage to look for their loved ones. But this just goes to show what is happening in this country. As Israel has expanded its attacks against Hezbollah for the past month, it looks as though there's no place that is truly safe here for those who are just caught in the crossfire.
Matt Bradley in Beirut. Matt, thank you. And still ahead, spotting the fake, the new effort to educate voters about deep fakes ahead of Election Day. The big names helping raise awareness about disinformation. And some of the biggest celebrities are featured in a new ad campaign about deceptive technology that could be used to try to influence the 2024 election. Stars like Amy Schumer and Michael Douglas are teaming up for this campaign against election-focused deep fakes. And they're warning Americans not to fall for AI-generated videos that could mislead people about when, where, and how to vote in November. NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian reports.
Gadi, we live in an era when almost anyone can use AI to create convincing deepfake videos, and those have already been used to try to interfere in the election. What this public service effort attempts to warn about is deepfake videos that try to fool people about when and where to vote. Take a look. It's a nightmare scenario for election security officials, and it's already happened once.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election.
That was an artificial intelligence-generated deepfake of President Biden's voice, sent to 50,000 Democratic voters before New Hampshire's primary in January. The political consultant behind it charged with felonies. Experts fear more of that is coming, and they say the best antidote is public awareness.
This election, bad actors are going to use AI to trick you
into not voting.
NBC News got an exclusive early look at a new public service ad out today, featuring a group of celebrities designed to highlight the threat of deepfake attempts at voter suppression.
They'll use fake phone calls,
videos, or messages to try to change when, how, or where you vote.
The bogus warning could appear to be coming from a trusted source.
A fake message saying voting has been extended.
Or your polling location has closed or changed due to an emergency.
Don't fall for it.
The ad features actors and television personalities, including Rosario Dawson, Chris Rock, Laura Dern, Michael Douglas, Amy Schumer, and Jonathan Scott.
So we decided.
Former Homeland Security official Miles Taylor is part of Represent Us, the nonpartisan group that produced the ad, which is airing on YouTube.
What we can do is make people aware that this is the new spam that tries to deceive them and to make sure that they don't fall for that deception.
Joshua Graham Lynn is the group's CEO.
It's almost impossible to tell what's a deepfake and what's not when you're flicking through your phone on a busy night. Just changing a few votes in one district could tip the whole election.
The ad seeking to show viewers just how easy it is to produce convincing fake video.
Voting is your right.
Don't let anyone take it from you.
I love you, Amy. I'm so sorry. I am not even American.
Experts are urging Americans to get information about voting only from official sources. And they say if something seems off, it probably is.
So sorry.
And Gadi, I wish I could tell people that there was one place to go to sort fact from fiction when it comes to time and manner of voting. But this is the United States, and elections are run at the state and local level, even presidential elections. And so what experts say is they're asking people to go to their Secretary of State website in their particular state or their local county board of election for official information about when and where to vote. Don't ever take the word of a video or an audio that is sent directly to you, because that's not how election officials communicate. Gadi?
Asking people to do their own homework. Kindalanian, thank you. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything, and we are going to be talking about connecting with giants tonight, how AI is being used to track humpback whales, not just to find them in the deep, but in ways experts hope will help this species thrive. That's coming up next. And tonight, in the future of everything, AI is joining the fight to save humpback whales. Scientists are using the technology to track what lies beneath, and it could eventually lead to so much more. NBC News Chief Environmental Affairs correspondent Ann Thompson ventured out to Monterey Bay to see how it all works.
It's feeding time for humpback whales off of California's central coast.
Oh, I just saw a whale. Really?
Kate Spencer is our boat captain.
Yes, indeedy. Monterey Bay is like the best restaurant in a food court.
Through the summer and fall, humpbacks dine on anchovies and krill to prepare for the trip to Mexico's warmer waters where the whales breed.
Oh, whales behind us.
Making this prime time for scientist Ted Cheeseman.
There they are. They can eat 10 to 20,000 pounds a day.
Oh, my gosh.
So they're literally eating up to 20% of their body weight in a day.
Before you see the whales, you can actually smell them, because after feasting on anchovies, whale breath has a unique aroma.
An aroma that had seemingly vaporized a mere 50 years ago.
Whoa! Once hunted to near extinction, whales are now resurfacing here in Monterey Bay in dramatic numbers.
Now with just a camera, photos from scientists and the public are helping researchers track whales from anywhere around the world.
Yeah, you can really see that whale there. Right?
Oh my gosh, look at the matches.
There you go. There's a match.
Thanks to artificial intelligence, in real time, Cheeseman can match their tails or flukes that tell stories of where the whales have been and how healthy they are.
How do you know that's a killer whale, Scar?
By the parallel lines there.
The pictures are uploaded and matched on Cheeseman's website, Happy Whale.
This photo identification's been around for 50 years, but what we've done is automated it so that we can just gather as much data as possible. So all of today's photos.
Through AI, that image is matched to other whales already photographed, like this one called Old Timer and Monet.
Our last recorded sighting of Monet was back in February down in Oaxaca, Mexico.
In his lab, Cheeseman says it is facial recognition technology that makes this possible.
The AI image recognition extracts all the signal that's in there. Like, you know, if you imagine on our face, right? I have kind of a big nose. That's part of the signal, right? Or, you know, all the different features that it can pull detail out of to look for a similar photo.
Now, is it true that no two whale tails are alike?
Absolutely.
Really?
You know, like a fingerprint or a face. Every humpback whale's tail is distinct.
And AI makes that recognition fast.
How long does it take you per photo now?
We don't measure the time. It's instantaneous.
Over 100,000 humpbacks identified. Some migrate thousands of miles, navigating threats from fishing lines and waters warmed by climate change, making food harder to find.
Warmer waters produce less food, and so there's less fish, less food for the whales.
But Cheeseman says the most valuable information gained may be human.
You connect with one whale, it connects you with the whole ocean. To have that healthy ocean, we have to treat it like it's part of our home. It's like it's a place we care about.
Using technology to connect and preserve the ocean for everyone and everything.
Before AI, identifying the whales was a time-consuming process. Cheeseman actually had to look at photos with his own eyes and try to see if they matched. It was an imprecise science. Now technology allows for much more precision. And Cheeseman says if you want to help out, the best pictures come from cameras with telephoto lenses. I'm Ann Thompson in New York. Now back to you.
So get out there with those cameras. Ann Thompson, thank you so very much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.